Thank you all for joining us at our workshop, Memorializing African American History, Cemeteries, Monuments, and Markers. We are in our session 3 of today, which is focusing on monuments and markers. Housekeeping, please keep your microphone on mute so that we'll have limited background noise. We will take questions or comments in the chat, and if we have time, which we hope we will, we'll have some time at the end to read them, get people's feedback and so on. We are recording the program, and we will make the recordings available on our website within a week or so, as well as on our e-newsletter. We want you to keep June 1st on your calendar for a virtual panel discussion commemorating the Tulsa Massacre. We are excited to have 2 people joining us, and we hope to have a third soon. Dr. Elena Roberts, who has researched African American and Native American presence in Oklahoma and that background to the situation there, and Dr. Mihir Desai, who is a Harvard Business School professor and has developed a case study on the Tulsa Massacre and reparations. You can find out more on our website. And of course, we want to thank the New Jersey Historical Commission for all of its support for Sankofa's work, and particularly for this workshop. As I said, we're in the 3rd session today, Monuments and Markers. And we will go, from the end of this session, we will go right into next steps, where Linda and Noelle Lorraine Williams will tell us more about some of the work that's going to happen next. And so I'd like to get us started by introducing Garrido Schneider, who is our moderator today. And he gave a wonderful presentation this morning. If you didn't have a chance to hear it along with Linda's presentation, I suggest you check out the recording once it's available. Gary's been committed throughout his career to cultivating human connections, community building, and lifelong learning through the arts. He is now, has been for a while now, Executive Director for the Grounds for Sculpture, which is a wonderful sculpture garden in Hamilton, New Jersey. And prior to that, he held various leadership positions at Montclair Art Museum. At Grounds for Sculpture, he's implemented a new strategic vision to expand the reach and impact of the grounds and to lead its transition from being founder-led to community-centric. He is committed to offering diverse audiences encounters with art, nature, and each other, and he's reinforced the Grounds for Sculpture's commitment to deepening relationships with living artists and to democratizing the approach to art. He has a bachelor's degree in fine arts from the Parsons School of Design and art education certificate from Bank Street. Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Sam, for the introduction. Thank you all for joining us today for today's gathering, exploring the enduring need, imperative, and continued opportunities to memorialize and center African American history. This concluding panel will focus on monuments and markers, and we will hear from Reverend Karen G. Johnston, the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project, Fayemi Shakur, and the work that she's doing with the Arts and Cultural Affairs Department for the City of Newark, Shirley Satterfield from the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, which she represents generations of lived commitment to the community, as well as the historic perspective on the community, and Dan Swern from coLAB Arts and the inclusive process that they take to art and community. There's chronological and geographic breadth to the histories of their respective projects. There's a great deal of work ahead for all of us to have a public landscape that commemorates and marks a fuller history and story of our history. I will lead off with just a few questions to keep in mind as we think and we take away from today's panel. What gets inscribed on our physical landscape and landscape of the American psyche? Whose stories are preserved and celebrated in the historic record? What and who is venerated? Who tells these stories, and what stories have not been told? What histories are flattened, distorted, and silenced? Author Carolyn Randall Williams refers to monuments as a standing memory, an artifact to make tangible the truths of the past. Our panelists today are all creatively reimagining and rebuilding new commemorative spaces and markers that celebrate and affirm that truth. We're going to begin with Reverend Karen G. Johnston. And Johnston is president of the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project, a multiracial grassroots group. The project was co-founded by the New Brunswick branch of the NAACP and the New Jersey chapter of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society and the Unitarian Society, plus several public-minded and spirited individuals. The Lost Souls Project understands ourselves to be stewards of the history of the lost souls of 1818, the approximate 137 African-American women, men, and children stolen into permanent slavery in the Deep South by a slave ring headed by a Middlesex County judge. Founded in 2017, the Lost Souls Project mission is committed to uncovering the history, raising community awareness, and building a memorial that remembers home of these lost souls. With that, Dr. Reverend Karen G. Johnston.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And it's such a joy and frankly, a thrill to be able to take part in this. So we and I appreciate the invitation and to be able to share this panel time with other folks doing really powerful work. I've been watching from afar the work on the Tubman monument, and we've done some behind the scenes collaboration. They've helped us out. So thank you. It's so great to be here with you, Fayemi, Shakur, and Dan Swern. We've done some collaboration, and Shirley Satterfield. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you so much, Gary, for starting us off on the panel. And I'm sorry that I missed this morning. I was trying to work on my sermon for Sunday. But I also want to just put a shout out there to the co-creators of the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project. We are a group of grassroots multiracial group that has become the stewards of this history. And our effort is totally a team effort. And a special shout out to our Vice President, Tony Hendricks, without whom I think we would just be stuck in place. So I'm going to share my screen and share some history with you, history that we're trying to raise awareness about, but then I'll also talk about the project itself and what we're doing. And I look forward to questions at the end. So you can find us on Facebook and on Instagram. We also have a wonderful website, and I'll put that in the chat when I'm done. Gary referenced parts of our mission statement before in the bio, and I want to raise it up to you again because we really try hard to stick to mission and to have our mission be alive and guide us. We've been making some recent decisions, and it was really parts of this mission that said, we have to shift and redo this or do it differently. So our three primary points are uncovering, recovering the relevant history. What we know has been known up and down and then gotten whitewashed, forgotten conveniently, enough that there is a street in the township of East Brunswick that is named after the slaver, right? So we are here to make sure this history is known and never forgotten. And that means raising community awareness in a way that it cannot be forgotten again. And we understand that in many ways, creating learning resources, but also building a public memorial. And we want to do these things, but focus not just on the product, focus on the process. And so that means that we are choosing to center the lost souls, the folks who were stolen away in 1818 by a slave ring that should never have existed. We try our best and get really creative to minimize how often we name that person, the Middlesex County judge who was the head of the slave ring. We want folks to know the lost souls as much as we can and their human histories. This also means that we are committed to centering the perspectives of Black individuals and community groups in our process, in our project. We want to make sure that major decisions are not made in white-only spaces. And we are guided by what we understand to be liberatory memory. This is a concept that was first introduced to us by Drake, who is an African-American archivist, researcher, grad student at Harvard, who has done some research on the slave ring. And he's told us about liberatory memory, and it just resonated with us. It actually comes from the work of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, from Chandra Gould and Verna Harris, but it's an emerging concept. It's not like it's written in stone or granite or metal, all the different pieces that some of our sculptures come out to be. It's emerging, and how we understand it is that it means that we are tending to our history writ large, often meaning that we're tending to pieces that have been whitewashed or erased. We are centering those who are damaged. Now, that word damaged, that comes directly from Gould and Harris. It's one I'm ambivalent about, but that centering piece, whose story are we telling? Who's being flattened and who's being raised up? If we go back to Gary's questions, that we are aware that we are shaping memory by what we are doing in the present, and that we are doing our part for a larger creative liberation. So that's what we understand liberatory memory to be. And it's important because it's one of the aspects that we're hoping an artist is going to be able to create when we create our future monument. So you have in front of you names of the lost souls. So I ask you, you can actually, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and just listen. Listen as I say their names. Peter, 21. Simon, a free man. Susan Watt, 35. Harriet Jane, 3. Rachel, 22, and her daughter, Regina, 6 weeks old. These are, of course, not all of the lost souls. The first year that we were active as a project, we knew of 85 names. We now know of 137 lost souls, 128 for whom we have names, some for whom we have a first and a last name, some we have age. 9 we know exist, but we don't have their names, at least not yet. And we don't know if we'll find more. So we hold loosely at least 137. So I'm going to give you a brief history. In 1818, 14 years after supposed gradual abolition in New Jersey, right, the last state in the North to enact, there was a judge in Middlesex County who lived in what is now East Brunswick, who with other folks, and I'm going to show you the names of them, historical accountability, who for his own financial benefit and that of his family, ended up deceiving, stealing, in some cases kidnapping, enslaved peoples, freed peoples, all African-American, women, men, children, one child 2 days old when he went before the judge in his home, and a fake consent was formed, and 10 days old when he was placed on a ship that went to New Orleans. 137 souls who were stolen away, members of our community, our wider community. So when we say we want to remember them, it's about bringing them back home. Sent to Louisiana, to the plantation that his brother-in-law had in Louisiana. Some went to other places. This began in February of 1818 and continued on until November. There were 4 boatloads of people and 1 party, wrong word, that went overland, stealing so many people away. There was a loophole in the law that allowed for someone to give consent to go out of state and be an indentured servant. That consent was manufactured by this judge and others. The slave, so here you can see the timeline. Where it talks about the Gradual Emancipation Act of 1804, right? And 14 years later, the slavery emerges. It was, slaves were more costly to buy in the Deep South. And so if they were captured or bought here and brought down south, there was money to be made. And so this is part of white supremacist capitalism at work, separating families. So we do know that this happened in this time period. Lots of different people over the years have been researching this. We have relied on our public scholar, Professor Crystal Langford, to do such diligent, meticulous research to help us understand how these different pieces fit together and who was involved. So to my knowledge, this is the first time we've been able to kind of put in one place the whole slave ring. And it involves many different people. And always my mind, it goes to this part that says, that tells us that the sitting governor of New Jersey is implicated in this. My understanding is that there were African Americans who were held in jails in New Brunswick, in Halfpenny, the Black community there, and in Newark. And some of them were free and some of them were enslaved, and they stayed there until the slaver who said that they owned them came and got them. But if you were free and couldn't prove it, then you were stuck in that jail. And the governor permitted those who were stuck in those jails to be sold to the Middlesex County judge, who was the head of the slave ring. It was a family affair. There are people here, the Morgans and the Van Wickles, who intermarried over multiple generations. There was strongly a profit motive involved here as well. But what we know is, as horrendous as this is part of a much larger piece of our national history, the Second Middle Passage, where 875,000 African Americans were removed from either the northern realms of southern slaveholding states or from the north, stolen. Think 12 Years a Slave, that story, Solomon Northrop, and then stolen into the Deep South, where conditions were far more brutal. But we know that the slave ring came to an end. We know that there was resistance. And I want to speak to you about that, in part because how we talk about the history is important, because that's what we know about ourselves. And it also is how we understand ourselves to be in the future. So when we think of resistance, I think about the mothers who refused to be separated from their children, even though these judges would there's a story where one of the babies cried, and the judge, whose name is Van Wickle, Jacob Van Wickle, said, "I take that as assent," and then turned to the child's mother and said, "Your child is going to Louisiana. What will you be doing?" Right, just horrific things. But here we are, mothers with a horrible choice, but refusing that diabolical evil piece of separation. We also know that of those kidnapped victims on boats, they used what they had to be able to resist, which included their voices. Their moans caught the attention of authorities, of customs agents, and they disclosed that they were being held against their will. They did what they could in a system that was working against them. Ultimately, through very different means, newspapers began to spread the word in Philadelphia, in New Orleans, in New Jersey. They began talking about the nefarious business of the slavering, the abominable traffic. They referenced the judge's residence, which he was using to hold people captive, as a slave castle. And in 3 counties in New Jersey, people organized to bring the slave ring down and to stop the kidnapping that was happening. Here in Middlesex County, where we're at, 103 men met. Maybe there were women present, but men signed the petition. And it said, "A time, however, has arrived, never contemplated by the people of the state, when the restraints imposed by the legislature are insufficient to guard against the proceedings of persons who thirst for gain, disregards the laws of God and man." So these petitions brought about a unanimous vote by the New Jersey Assembly, which prohibited the exportation, the kidnapping of people of color. We know that there were indictments in New Jersey. There are different numbers for those. And we know that there were at least 3 convictions. And we also know that the head of the slave ring, Judge Jacob Van Wickle, was never held to account. This last piece of resistance, I want to name Phoebe. And we don't quite know how to spell Phoebe's name yet. I'm hoping that we will. But Phoebe is the only one we know to have escaped. You might remember I told you there were 4 boatloads and 1 group that went over land. And that group that went over land actually happened after that act was passed in the assembly. Phoebe escaped from that overland group. We're still trying to figure out what happened to her. We hope we can, but I want to raise up Phoebe and her ingenuity. She's in my mind a lot these days. If I still have a little bit of time, I'll tell you quickly about how much time do I have, Gary? How's that? That's a better question.
Like 2 or 3 minutes.
Awesome. I'm going to go quick through our project. A local historian kept close this history so it wouldn't be forgotten. In 2017, I learned about it and joined the stream of people who were trying to hold this. And we then formed the project, which held a bicentennial year of community awareness conversations. We got wonderful support from the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, giving us 2 incubation grants so that we could really begin to imagine what this project would look like. We are on our path to becoming a 501c3. We've always had a fiscal agent to take care of us. And we were blessed in February of 2020 to be highlighted in this article that was part of the 1619 project written by Dr. Ann Bailey. They sold human beings here. It was in the New York Times Magazine just before the pandemic break. And in it is this powerful image from Danielle Bowman of the site, right, where the slave castle used to be. You can see it's a power substation. There was a lot of forgetting that happened, enough to say, we don't even want to think about what might have been there. There's a sign that says danger because of the electrical substation, but frankly, I think that danger speaks to a deeper history. Right now, we are working on a juried design competition, and we're asking for submissions due June 1st. And so if you know artists who are working, who want to take a part in this, we welcome them. It's on our website. We are working on widening community awareness and fundraising so that we can fund a memorial, and we welcome more volunteers. Every year, we recite the names of the lost souls. We remember them home. We do this at the end of May, and we are doing it this year on May 23rd, Sunday at 4 p.m. at the site of the future home of the memorial, because we have partnered with the Township of East Brunswick. And we invite you to attend either in person, socially distanced, or we'll be doing it, live streaming it on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. But we will be unveiling this bronze marker to note that this is the future site that will hold the memorial so that these folks can never be forgotten. Thank you so much for this time to present.
And Johnston, thank you so much for your work and the work of the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project, and the important reminder that the importance of closure for healing and being able to move forward, even at whatever point that closure happens. It's critical. So thank you for that work. Our next speaker that I have the pleasure to introduce is Fayemi Shakur, who serves as the Arts and Cultural Affairs Director for the City of Newark. Since joining the Honorable Mayor Ross Baraka's administration in January of 2020, Ms. Shakur has developed the City of Newark's Creative Catalyst Fund, providing support to individual artists and to small and mid-sized community arts organizations. She also oversees the city's public art program, creating opportunities for neighborhood revitalization and arts-based community engagement. Currently, she's also leading the city's Harriet Tubman Monument Project. As a writer and cultural critic, her work has been featured in the New York Times, CNN Style, in the book Women Photographers in the African Diaspora, among other books and publications. In 2019, she founded A Womb of Violet, a project-based collaborative or collective that celebrates the work of Black women, writers, poets, and artists. With that, I would love to welcome Fayemi Shakur. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, there's so much to tell you about what's happening in the city of Newark. And just today, I'm so excited that we announced our press release related to our Harriet Tubman Monument Project and the 5 designs or 5 artists that have presented conceptual designs. So I'm going to put that link in the chat so that you all can see them. And it's actually a feedback website. And so it's open, of course, for Newark residents specifically, but there is an option if you live outside of the city for residents from all over to share your comments as well. So before I get off, I'm going to put that in the chat and welcome you all to take a look at the designs. But first, I wanted to, start by talking about how I kind of entered this work through a project with the Monument Lab that we did in 2016 in Newark called A Call to Peace. And that project was really about reimagining public art and monuments as monuments all across the nation were being reconsidered, particularly those monuments built in colonial Confederate era. And so I don't have kind of formal presentation or slide ready to share, but I did want to share my screen just to share some images from that project if I can. And so this is one of them on my messy, jumbled up screen. So this is Borglum's Wars of America Monument that's located in Military Park downtown. And it was really the center of our conversation. And in working with Manuel Acevedo, who you see here, he decided to do a happening, an intervention covering up the monument and inviting us to have conversation about it. Those are some of the curators that I worked with. And that is a series of conversations that we would have weekly in the park, talking about memory, history, and public art, and inviting community residents to submit their own proposals for what would be a timely monument for Newark. We received proposals from all ages, children, adults, seniors, and of course, some of them identified figures who are more representative of what Newark looks like today. Many people walking by the park didn't even know what that Wars of Monument statue was all about. They didn't know the history of it. They didn't know that Borglum once also designed and created Mount Rushmore. They didn't know that it was partially funded by the KKK. I too was unaware of this history, and it just gave us a profound opportunity to talk about it. There were many questions from historians about were we gonna remove the monument? And of course, no. We decided it's a huge monument in the middle of our park, but we did feel it was important to have a conversation about it, to not walk past it unknowingly and uninformed about the composition of our public art collection in the city. And so from there, working with Salamisha Tillett and Paul Farber from Monument Lab, we kept in touch, having these conversations about monuments and really following what was happening around the country. And then when I joined the administration with Mayor Baraka in January 2020, as you all know, that summer of unrest, we saw more monuments coming down. And so the mayor asked me and a few other local artists if we should remove our Columbus statues from Washington Park. And my immediate response was absolutely. And we started to have a conversation about how long, since some of us were in elementary school, we had been talking about the false narrative of Columbus discovering America. And here was our profound opportunity to shift that conversation, to honor Indigenous peoples, to honor liberation struggle, and rethink again what public art could be in this city. And so the mayor called me one night around 9 p.m. and he said, call a few people, not too many, we're gonna take it down tonight. And so we gathered at midnight around the Columbus statue for the removal. And I just, if I can, want to share with you some video from that evening. Share my screen again. So that was the scene there that night. It was more emotional than I anticipated it would be. I'm grateful that we had drummers and poets and children out there that evening. Some people cried as Columbus was taken off of his pedestal. Some people cheered. Some people hugged one another. And so immediately after, the mayor always knew what he wanted to go in Columbus's place. And he decided it should be Harriet Tubman. And I asked the mayor if I could form a commission on public art that could include some of our local historians who had done some of this research around the Underground Railroad in Newark, and also some of our art experts who could help us with recommendations on how to go about this process, how we would commission an artist to design this monument, and what kind of information they would need to do that. And so it all came together rather quickly. We announced the RFP. We received about 50 responses from all over the nation. We asked the artists who submitted to be inclusive of any Newark-based apprentice. And so now we're finally at the point where we're ready for the community and our selection committee to make a decision. And it's very exciting. And so that connection of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad has so many myths associated with it. There's so many stories that have been told of where Harriet was believed to have visited in the city of Newark, churches that she visited. And overall, we do know that she came here. And so it's really about representation and thinking about what this generation of our young people and our residents need to see in our Public Art Commission, and really presenting to our city and our community new ways to think about this type of art. And so the designs that were presented are a broad range. Some are more abstract, conceptual. Some are traditional and representative sculpture. I'm gonna post in the chat the link so that you all can see it. But in addition to installing this monument, which will be done 2022, we are revitalizing the entire Washington Park and renaming it Tubman Square. So we're very excited about this opportunity. Dr. Linda Epps and Noelle Lorraine Williams, who are also joined with us here today, are part of our commission. We will make some recommendations to the city, and we expect to announce the winner in June. I'm just gonna put the link in the chat for you all and yield the rest of my time to the next presenter.
It helps if I say thank you when I'm not on mute. So thank you. And thank you for this sort of journey that you brought us on, from the recontextualization of the existing monuments to the kind of emotional release that you shared associated with the taking down of the Columbus Memorial and Monument, and this very inclusive and thoughtful approach that the city is taking to the establishment of Tubman Square, and this sort of community input into how Harriet Tubman will be commemorated in the city. So it's incredibly thoughtful approach and model, and gracious. You've been very gracious in sharing even your journey along this process. So thank you so much.
Thank you too.
I have the pleasure now of shifting to introduce our next speaker. Is Shirley Satterfield. Is from a family that spans 6 generations in Princeton and grew up in segregated Princeton. She has a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Bennett College for Women and a master's in guidance and counseling from Trenton State College, now the College of New Jersey. While a student at Bennett, Ms. Satterfield participated in the 1961 sit-ins in Greensboro, North Carolina. During her career in education, she was a teacher and guidance counselor in schools across the country. Researching and sharing the rich history of her church and the Princeton African-American community is Ms. Satterfield's passion. In the 1990s, she researched and trained tour guides for a walking tour of Princeton's African-American history, which includes the Princeton Cemetery, known for notable burials there. The tour highlights the lives and contributions of many African-American residents buried in the colored section of the cemetery. She worked with 8 other community activists to have the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood become Princeton's 20th Historic District in 2016, and she co-founded the Witherspoon-Jackson Historic and Cultural Society to continue the preservation of the work and contributions of African Americans in Princeton. Shirley Satterfield.
Thank you very much, Gary. And thank you also, Sam, for inviting me to be a member of this extraordinary panel of historians. I have so much to give, but I only have 15 minutes. But so much of what people have said, we can relate to the history because it's so much alike. But what I'm doing is giving you the history through our plaques. The Witherspoon-Jackson Historical and Cultural Society thought, you know, we preserve and share and save all of the history of the African Americans in Princeton. But there's so many establishments that are no longer here. And if they are here, they're not what they used to be. So we have 29 heritage plaques throughout, not just the Witherspoon-Jackson community, which is known as the African American community, but of other areas in Princeton where African Americans were prominent. So you're going to see 12 of the 29 historic plaques. So I'm going to share. Now, I'm not good at this, so bear with me. I just lost you.
We can still hear you.
Can you still see me?
We can still see you. Yeah, you're still here.
Here we go, here we go. Okay. It didn't work.
Yep, we can
Can you see it?
see your screen,
No, that's not what I want you to see.
but maybe not what, not the screen.
Share screen. So, told you I'm not good at this. It worked when I did it before the meeting. Okay. That's not it. Help me out. Okay, there it is. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to go take a journey through plaques.
Shirley, sometimes on this, the arrows don't work. If you click on this, with the mouse on the screen, I think sometimes it advances.
Not moving. There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to take you through a journey in the African American community and some areas that aren't in the African American community. These plaques are made of steel. And what you see here that's going to be on every plaque is the map that shows the Witherspoon-Jackson community. And all of these little dots tell you where you can go next. This one is a plaque that's dedicated to Mr. Burnett Griggs. Now, each one of these plaques are donated by people, organizations, and individuals in the community. This is Mr. Burnett Griggs. Now, I need to let you know that there were a lot of businesses in our community because we were not welcomed in businesses in Princeton. We were not allowed to go to the restaurants or any businesses on Nassau Street. So our community had everything. We had stores in homes, we had beauty parlors, we had barbershops. So we were self-sufficient in this community, even though people didn't even come in this community at times. So one of the persons who was very well established was Mr. Burnett Griggs. And Mr. Griggs came to Princeton from North Carolina. And he worked at the university for a while, but he really, really wanted a business. So there was a person who was related to the Howe Insurance Company. And as usual, he called him a good Negro, and he said he would help him get his restaurant. So he had a restaurant that he established on the corner of Hallfish and Witherspoon Streets. Now, I don't know how many of you know Princeton, but usually when I give these tours, everyone has a map and you have to go and look where these places are. So if you've been to Princeton and you've been where the library is and where Heinz Plaza is, right across the street is a parking lot. And that's where Mr. Griggs had his restaurant. He called it the Imperial Restaurant. The Princeton community and the university students enjoyed delicious hamburgers and delicious Southern meals. He was offered a generous amount during urban renewal to remove his restaurant. And he said, for every penny that I got, I will not leave this restaurant for $1 million. He had this Imperial Restaurant for 42 years. And then when he no longer had the restaurant, it became a parking lot. So for those of you who come to Princeton and you park there, that's called now the Griggs Corner. And when it was first a parking lot, you see a picture of Mr. Griggs here. It was an Amoco gas station and a Dunkin' Donut. And right above where you see that stream at the top, it said Griggs Corner. Well, they removed that. And now they have a little sign that said Griggs Lot. But it was owned by his family, and then it was sold to Palmer Square. Now, there were Italians who lived in our community. There were Italians, there were Irish immigrants, and the Italians came as stone cutters, stone masons for the university. And there was a man whose name was Reverend Henry Van Dyke. And Henry Van Dyke came from Germantown. And he came with his family and he settled in an area of Princeton known as Avalon. And if any of you know where the YMYWCA is, their parking lot and playground is where Reverend Van Dyke had his property. He brought his family along with him. And one of his daughters, as you see in the picture with her husband, was Dorothea. And Dorothea was a woman who took care of the Italian immigrants, made sure they had their housing, made sure they had their education. She was just like a mother to the Italian people who came. And you see a picture of them in front of Dorothea's house. She married a man whose name was Guy McCann. And Guy McCann was a stockbroker from New York. And in childbirth, she died at the age of 23. And in honor of her, her father, Henry Van Dyke, and her husband built the Dorothea's house. And the Dorothea's house is on John Street, right across the street from the Baptist church. So it wasn't only a settlement for African Americans, it was also a community for Italian Americans. However, the Italian Americans and the Irish could move out. We could not. So we sustained the Witherspoon-Jackson community. Now, on your left side is a picture of Mr. Ball. Mr. Ball came from North Carolina, and he brought his wife and his child with him. He came to Princeton in 1922, and he settled in this house on John Street. And he made a little house on the side of, I don't have a picture, oh, at the bottom, you see his daughter. Well, if you look at the side, you can see an awning. He had a little store there. And that little store served us for candy and ice cream and soda. And when children went to Sunday school at the Baptist church, they had to pass Mr. Ball's house. And they had money for Sunday school. Well, half of that money was gone because they would stop by Mr. Ball's and get some candy. It was also right across the street from the Witherspoon School for Colored Children where I went. And we would go to Mr. Ball's for candy. So that was a noted store. And Mr. Ball had that store for quite a while. Now I want you to look at the picture on the other side. Before Mr. Ball had this store, it was owned by a man whose name was Henry Austin. And you see a picture of, am I in the way of that picture? I don't know if I can, I don't know if everybody can see it. But in this picture,
We can see it fine.
You can see it.
you can see it, oh good, is a football team. And this football team was before around 1910. And at the top of the picture are the men who were the coaches. The man in the middle was a minister of Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church. But I want you to focus on the young man who is in, I think, the second row with a white shirt on. And you can see it says Henry Austin. Henry Austin lived in that house with his family. And I'll tell you about his father later in the day. He went to Howard University, became a doctor, came back to Princeton, was not allowed to serve in Princeton. So he went to Trenton. And there are 4 Henry Austin health centers in Trenton. A lot of people, first of all, don't know that he was Black. And second of all, didn't know that he was raised in Princeton. But I'm sure some of you who are familiar with Trenton know these 4 health centers. Then we moved to John Street. And here we have one of the establishments. There were actually 3 fraternal organizations in Princeton: the Masonic Temple, the Elks Club or the Elks Home, and the American Legion. And this was what wasn't considered one of the establishments, but it was a nightclub. It was for men only. And it was called, I want you, if you have a pen, write this down. I want you to spell colored men backward. And if you don't have a pen, I'll let you know what it means. This club for men was called the Narcoleptic. I'm not too sure I can pronounce it, but Mr. Hines will always tell me I said it wrong. But it's colored men spelled backward. And it was a noted nightclub for men. And in 1947, there was a ruckus there. And the man who lived across the street was the second African-American policeman. His name was Walter B. Harris, who was honored in Princeton. He went across the street, not in uniform, to see what the ruckus was. And it happened to be 2 men who were fighting. One was from Trenton, one was Princeton. And unfortunately, he was shot in the line of duty. And there is a monument at Monument Hall, Witherspoon Hall on Witherspoon Street dedicated to him. And every year they have a ritual to honor Patrolman Harris. But this is the Charcoal Inn. Now, it's also important to know that there are 3 locations in Princeton that are in the Green Book. And you all know the Green Book. It's called the Negro Motorist Green Book, and it listed hotels, taverns, nightclubs, restaurants, service stations, automotive, tour homes, road homes, barbershops, and beauty parlors, where African Americans could go as they traveled not only through the South, but also from Maine to California. It was published by Victor H. Green, and it cost 25 cents to purchase. And a lot of people who were traveling mainly through the South, but also through the United States, would get the Green Book so they would know where to stay and where they could get what they needed. So this establishment, the Charcoal Inn, is in the Green Book. And what it says is, the famous Charcoal Narcoleptic Club, dining room, cocktail lounge, telephone 1510-184 John Street, Princeton, New Jersey. Because we could not shop on Nassau Street or other places in Princeton, we had all of our shops on Lee Avenue. And we called it the diverse shops on Lee Avenue. And you see the man with his hand up here, that was Balvino. Balvino had a store. And if anybody's been to Princeton, there's a Mexican restaurant on Lee Avenue. And that's where Balvino's was at that time. That's where we did our grocery shopping. Across the street on Lee Avenue was Baldino. And he also had a grocery store. And both of the families were Italian. Next to that, where you see the 2 gentlemen at the top, was where Balvino's grocery store was. And next to it was Billy the Greek. And Billy the Greek had a restaurant, had the best hot sausage restaurant, hot sausage sandwiches. And across from, on John Street, across on Lee Avenue, was Mrs. Rhodes. Mrs. Rhodes was an African-American, we were called colored then, and she had a candy store. And next to Mrs. Rhodes, and this is politically incorrect, but we called her the Jew lady. And when we grew up, we never knew what her name was, but that's what we called her, the Jew lady, and there was no problem with that. And I remember when my grandmother had Christian Endeavor, when all the children would come to our house on Sunday, and she would send me to the Jew lady to get candy, and I would get those green leaves and those mint, those orange slices, and ate half of them before I got back home for the children. But these are where we shopped on Lee Avenue, and where Balvino's is now the local Greek restaurant. And other stores had gone through the years from the 1930s to the 1960s. Now we're going back up to Nassau Street. And perpendicular to Nassau Street, there was a street that was called Baker Street or Baker Alley. And this is where African Americans lived. That's the top picture that you see with the cars. And many of the people who lived there, worked at the university. So all they had to do was go across the street. Well, this was our first urban renewal. It was a man whose name was Edgar Palmer. And Edgar Palmer graduated from Princeton University. He was from a family who owned zinc. When he graduated, he looked across the street and he said, this looks like an area that could be like Rockefeller Center. So it was 1929. In 1929, he was not able to do a thing because what was going on in 1929? Anybody can tell me? Okay, not hearing anyone, it was a Great Depression. So he came back in the late 30s and he demolished part of these houses that you see at the top. The others he divided in two. And as Mr. Hines told me, he took them on logs and rolled them down John Street to Birch Avenue. Birch Avenue is the last street in the Witherspoon-Jackson community. The houses you see at the bottom were houses that came from Baker Alley or Baker Street on near Nassau Street. And these houses are still standing. Now, when he had brought these houses down to Birch Avenue, there weren't enough houses for the people that he displaced. So he built houses on the other side of the street and he called them rainbow houses because each house was a different pastel color. So these are the houses that were moved from Baker Street near Nassau Street. And that's our first urban renewal. And then we come to Witherspoon Street. On your left, you see the opening to the colored cemetery. There are 3 openings to the cemetery. It's owned by the Nassau Church. And at that time, it was called the First Presbyterian Church in 1775. And then they had to have a place to bury the colored people. Now, I'm still doing research to find out what happened to the slaves because we had slaves in Princeton since the 1600s. And I don't know where they buried the slaves, but there had to be somewhere. The only slave that I know that's in that cemetery is Jimmy Johnston. And Jimmy Johnston was a slave who came in the late 1800s to Princeton from Maryland. And they said by the time he had $5 when he left Maryland, by the time he got to Princeton, he had 5 cents. But he settled in Princeton and he worked at the university. And one of the students recognized him as a slave. So he was put back into slavery. And a rich woman gave him his freedom, and he took his little carts and he would take all his wares around the university. And he probably was one of the first entrepreneurs. He died in 1902. His tombstone is in the colored section of the cemetery, and it was donated by the students of Princeton University. Now, this picture was taken in 1997. Since then, all of that side of the cemetery is full of tombstones. And it's not all African Americans, but this is where our families were buried. Now, if you look on the other side, there are 4 African American churches. I couldn't do them all because I don't have enough time. This is the oldest, and it's the AME Methodist Church, Mount Zion, Mount Pisgah AME Church. And this is the first rendering of the church where you see the people in front. All churches, the 4 churches started in homes before they had their buildings. So they started in a home across the street. And then this was built in 1832. So it's the oldest of the 4 African-American churches.
Shirley, just a note on time, we're coming up on about 20 minutes. So we have, let's say, about 3 to 5 minutes left.
Okay, 3 to 5 minutes. I'll do my best. Okay.
Okay.
Right across the street from the cemetery is the first school for colored children. And public education was started in Princeton in 1851. This building that you see at the top that looks like a house was built in 1853. And it was built to house the children in the borough and the township of Princeton. Now, the picture you see at the bottom of the children is in my family. And on the back of the picture, it says Witherspoon School, 1904. Somewhere in this picture is Paul Robeson. Nobody alive knows where Paul Robeson is, but he's in that picture. There's a register that you see on the other side of my grandmother's class. And she had boys from the age of 6 to the age of 10. That's just the boys in her class. And you can see a larger print that she taught Paul Robeson, who was 6 years old, then living at 13 Green Street. And that's her register and that's her picture. Now, children went from kindergarten to 8th grade. When they graduated from 8th grade, they were not allowed to go to the high school in Princeton. So many of the families who came from the South, their children went back down South to school, or they got a trolley pass. And you see a trolley pass at the bottom that fell out of the wall at the Paul Robeson house when we were renovating it. And it gave Paul Robeson's oldest brother, William, permission to go on the trolley from Princeton to Trenton to go to school, to go to high school. And this is Paul Robeson. There is a plaque in front of, that's going to be in front of his house. It's being renovated now. It's going to be a cultural center, but this is the house where he was born. And I showed at the top the trolley tracks. That's the trolley tracks that took the trolley from Princeton to Trenton. And on the side, you see white steps. That's his house. He was born here in 1898. His father was a Presbyterian minister, as you see on the other side. His mother was from the noted Bustle family in Philadelphia. His name is Paul Leroy Bustle Robeson. He was named Bustle after his mother's family. And this is the house as it's going to be renovated. So it's all, you can see what it looks like now. And it was a rooming house. Shortly after the Robesons moved out, it became a rooming house. And there were a lot of rooming houses in our community for people who came to Princeton and had nowhere to stay, so they came into our community. And you see at the bottom, the house that his father moved to after he was, for 21 years, he was the pastor of Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church, and he was removed by the presbytery because he fought too much for the rights of the Negro. And this is the house they moved in. Of course, there was no siding and there was no air conditioning, but this is 13 Green Street where he moved his family. And when he was no longer a minister, he became an ashman, which is basically a man who collected garbage. And this is how he supported his family until he left to go to Westfield and then to Somerville, New Jersey. And by the way, he started 2 churches in Westfield and Somerville, and they were both Methodist. He was no longer Presbyterian. Do I have enough time? I'm almost finished. This is the colored Y. We had our colored Y because we were not, we couldn't mix with the white Y that was on Nassau Street. This is the Y that's on the corner of Paul Robeson, which is now Paul Robeson Place and Witherspoon Street. And it was a colored Y since the early 1900s. You see the men who were raising money for the second one because the first building burned. And this is a Y where I went, and I had I was in a group called the Darlettes. But this was our Y and was no longer a Y, and there was a Y that started in 1958. And you see the woman here, that's Mrs. Waxwood. Mrs. Waxwood was the first executive director of the integrated Y from 1958 to 1968. And at the bottom, you see what the Y looks like now, which is the Arts Council of Princeton. And that's the entrance to the Paul Robeson Center of the Arts Council of Princeton. This is the last one. This is a Citizen. And if you were to come down Witherspoon Street from Nassau Street, where LaHare's restaurant used to be, that's now the Agricola, I think is the name of it, there was a publishing company there. and started in the early 1900s. This is a copy of the 1906 version, and it's the only copy. It was owned by Mr. Hines. It's now with the Historical Society of Princeton. And the reason I'm showing this is because this was a newspaper that was dedicated to the moral, the industrial, the educational, and the religious life of the Negro. And it also had an advertisement section in it also. So this was a citizen that it was, the publisher was, he was called a Negro editor. It was Henry Austin, who was the father of Henry Austin that I showed you earlier, who went to Trenton to start his health practice. So this is the end. I had more, but it's important that you know that all of these represent what we're going to have to let people know that African Americans have done and continue to do everything in Princeton. Since the early 1800s, the African American community in Princeton has withstood segregated housing and schooling, social separation, and employment discrimination. Through it all, our relatives continued this community as proud residents whose blood, sweat, skills, and faith sustained them in the entire town of Princeton. At the bottom of this, I have the website. If you go into the website, princetonwjhcs.org, you will see all of these plaques. You go in and you see little red dots. Just hit on the little red dots and up will come all of the plaques and you'll see them all. You can read who donated them. I'd like to say that one I didn't show is the nursery school. And the nursery school, well, as I say, was dedicated by different people. The nursery school was dedicated by the Not in Our Town. And Not in Our Town is a group that works to fight against segregation, racism, white supremacy. And I have someone who's on here, Linda Oppenheim, who's a faithful member of Not in Our Town. So I thank you all. I try to get through this real fast. I get nervous when I do it fast, but I had to do it so you could see it all. But please look at our website and look at the plaques, not only the plaques, but all of our newsletters. And I hope to see all of you. And I want to say to Beverly, Beverly is my cousin through the Blackwells. And also one of the tombstones in the Stroudsburg Cemetery is John Van Zandt. John Van Zandt was my grandfather's brother. And I have a letter that Wayman Van Zandt wrote about his brother. And Beverly and Elaine, I'll see that you get it. And thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Satterfield. This has been so informative. Sam did put the link to the website in the chat for anybody that wants to grab that there as well. It'll bring you right to the website, and it is very easy to navigate. I have it open right now, and being able to click on and be able to see each of the plaques. Thank you very much. I think we're going to shift screens now, and so that I can introduce our final speaker for this afternoon's panel. This is my difficult job, is moving from one informative and fascinating panel to the next. But our last speaker for this section of the day is Dan Swern. Dan is the co-founder and producing director of coLAB Arts, where he facilitates and commissions public art projects from murals and sculptural installation work to creative placemaking efforts with local government and advocacy organizations. Mr. Swern is the owner of Smug Bug Productions, providing services in creative development and stage direction, production consulting, and producing. He is the creator, director, and designer of the Drama Desk nominated culinary theater project Shake and Bake, Love Lovers Lost, which ran off-Broadway in 2018, and is the producer for the rock musical comedy The 11th Hour. Mr. Swern also serves as general manager and director of the Obie Award-winning company, The Secret City. He teaches creative engagement for the Masters in Communications and Media graduate program at Rutgers University School of Communication and Information, and community engagement for Mason Gross School of Arts Dance Department graduate choreography program. With that, please join me in welcoming Dan Swern.
Thank you, Gary. I'm going to share my screen, and I know folks have questions, so I'm going to see if I can get through this as quickly as possible for you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the co-founder of coLAB Arts and the producing director in New Brunswick, part of the traditional territory of the Lenni Lenape called the Lenape-Hoking. Our mission is to engage artists, social advocates, and communities to create transformative new work. And I also teach, as Gary mentioned, at Rutgers University. For coLAB Arts, our work is multidisciplinary, including embedded artist residencies, comic book commissions, musical theater, verbatim theater, photo essays, podcasts, and public art. And every project includes an oral history collection and annotation process, which serves as resource material for our artists, as well as anecdotal evidence for our community and research partners. The 3 murals pictured here are all in New Brunswick, created following months of community conversations and oral history collection leading up to their culminating installations. On the left is As Birds on Pinions Free, created by artist R.H. Does as an intercultural conversation between our Oaxacan, Hungarian, and Polish communities who have all historically shared shared the same neighborhoods at different generational times and have all engaged in their own experience of immigration. The second was La Gota Rompe la Piedra, The Drop of Water Breaks the Stone, created by Lekwa Nuna Yawara, which is an identity statement that was produced in response to the intense fear created by the Trump administration in 2016. And the third is Raritan Riverways, produced by Leon Rainbow in response to oral histories and conversation related to the stewardship, recreation, and subsistence on the Raritan River. Every project that coLAB produces integrates oral history, partly because the content can only benefit the art making, and part of it is that we're going to create work that reflects a community, that we need to produce artifacts of that process. We've actually had to do some heavy lifting with pro bono legal support on this, because when we started, we discovered an ethical line for which we hadn't been looking, that oral historians lean towards narrator control of content, while journalists lean towards interviewer control. And as socially engaged artists, we found ourselves sitting on both sides of this line and recognized 3 important values that we bring into our work. 1, we needed to reinforce the idea that we're storytellers first, not researchers, and that the story as told is tremendous value for our work. 2, that stylistically we would preference life course oral history over journalism, because it's the answers to the unasked questions that we find really add beauty to our stories. And 3, we use oral history as a means towards bringing professional and academic practice closer together by connecting dots between lived experience and the conditions that created it, thereby creating an open source system built around anecdotal evidence. Creative engagement is a grounded theory approach to storytelling, meaning that our content is reflective of inductive reasoning and observation of a community or constituency, but that the catalyst can really come from anywhere. The work can start in the lab, in the studio, or at a protest. The technical work is tied into the facilitation. What the work becomes is largely based on emergent design. We have a clear process, but the potential for impact within a community is developed alongside the artist and the residency in action. coLAB Arts facilitates artist residencies across creative disciplines and places artists in government agencies, nonprofits, and within communities. We believe in mission-driven practice as a means to draw artists together into a shared space. Chris Stibble was a photographer in residence with the City of New Brunswick who produced photo essays of city employees to create stronger civic engagement with residents. Sam Romero is producing a comic book documenting the experiences of clients from Neighbor Corps reentry services, individuals who are leaving Middlesex County Jail and reentering their respective communities. And Tanakil Marquez is the artistic director for Teatro Esperanza, a local Spanish language community theater company documenting and responding to social issues in New Brunswick, particularly tenants' rights. We produce projects that directly engage with our world. We facilitate convenings through grounded conversations around social justice issues, place-based strategic planning and community building, and we use creative practice to help support our social services. Life, Death, Life Again is a verbatim theater piece that uses interviews with individuals incarcerated for murder as juveniles and sentenced to life without parole as a means to convene with community leaders around the harms of extreme sentencing. We worked with the Blaustein School in Middlesex County to facilitate a storytelling workshop series and Story Slam to launch the county's strategic planning process, producing anecdotal experiences of local residents to inform the strategic direction and concurrent listening sessions. And finally, 37 Voices is an example of how we use anecdotal experiences to inform our community partners on how extant systems inform social deficits on an individual level. And sometimes when we can't source an individual stated experience, it shows our partners new directions for journalism, advocacy, and research. And importantly, we're incredibly conscious of our role as artists. We're invited into spaces because we're very good at facilitating community discussions and story synthesis through creative practice. Our civic projects especially are intended to respond to the stated needs of our partner organizations and constituencies. For community engaged projects, in New Brunswick, we specifically work regularly with the Esperanza neighborhood. A clearly defined input and decision-making structure is put in place to ensure that our work is directed by the partner community. That includes the storytelling, the art making, and even budget expenditures. And the social beneficiary of that work is always clearly identified. Mercado Esperanza is a monthly festival that we co-produce with Elijah's Promise in New Brunswick tomorrow, emphasizing food entrepreneurship, arts, and culture. And this year, due to the pandemic, we've instead invested our resources in paying participating vendors to cook meals for distribution to the local community. So I'm going to shift over now to video for a project that I wanted to just spend a little bit more time discussing. Where are you? Here we are. Okay. Oh, there we go. So the video that I'm letting roll in the background is from our recent mural series in Alice Jennings Archibald Park. They're family photos that were generously shared with us by Sharon Lane, a great niece of Mrs. Archibald. And we played this video at our virtual unveiling and included the oral history of another family member, Frances Moore, as underscore. And one of our partners, the City of New Brunswick, annually commissions us to facilitate a community engagement process that culminates in a new mural installation in different areas of the city. For 2020, we were tasked with producing a new mural series in Alice Jennings Archibald Park, adjacent to McKinley Community School. And now when we initially committed to planning out this project, it was September 2019, very pre-pandemic. And our whole design process was built around student and immediate neighborhood engagement to inform the story of the work, including local oral history. Our lead artist assigned to this project, R.H. Does, is white Hungarian, born and raised in New Brunswick, an educator, and had already facilitated incredibly strong intercultural work with us elsewhere in the city, as indicated by his piece as Birds on Pinions Free. However, once we were in lockdown, we really had to rethink and refocus the narrative of the project. And where we landed was to move forward through the park's namesake, Alice Jennings Archibald, and that we'd create a legacy piece meant to be in conversation with the elementary students at McKinley. And what that also triggered was the realization that for years, our community-based focus on storytelling and support had been squarely placed on our local Latino community. And this would be the first project where our organization would be predominantly facilitating storytelling around the African-American experience in New Brunswick. I share this because when we typically engage in a new public art project, it's with the intention to produce a community conversation of benefit to collective understanding or place-based identity that culminates with an artifact as a reminder of that work. What became different about this project was as we set upon our research in the spring and summer of 2020, and as we developed new partnerships, is that it became incredibly hard to resist centering ourselves in the work, not in any way that would harm the art, its partners, or its intention, but because it became incredibly important for coLAB Arts as an institution to listen, learn, and change. This mural would also be an artifact stating as to whether or not we could. In the mural series, It Is Better to Light a Candle Than Curse the Darkness, is a 4-panel installation that focuses on Mrs. Archibald's community service, and in the words of her family members, an adamant belief that a successful life is predicated on a rigorous education. Later today, I'm going to be meeting with a community partner to discuss the creation of a mural in Jersey City in honor of the United Auto Workers Union. And I have to make sure that we include conversations about how union leadership may not have reflected everyone in the union and how that relates to the composition of the neighborhood that will be benefiting from the mural. I have to bring up the present moment, and that if we're going to have community conversations in designing this mural, we have to acknowledge that protest in a time of racial reckoning is not different from protesting on the assembly line. And when I started teaching spatial justice work to my undergraduate communication students at Rutgers last semester, all seniors, I was incredibly excited to bring the positionality and structural and program-based anti-racism work that I was engaged in into the classroom. And I was grateful for the excitement and willingness of my students. But for their first virtual class presentation, they were each tasked with setting the table for the work they'd be focusing on through the semester and identifying their key project inclusions, and namely the New Brunswick Community of Benefit and the historical and social context for their marginalization. And God bless them, their hearts were in the right place, but they performed exactly as undergraduate students, and pushed to present for the first time in a new class, playing fast and loose with the details, being non-committal with historical facts, rushing or ho-humming through their presentation. And where I may have previously let that first desperate work slide, like, thank God they at least made it through the end without crumbling, I couldn't, because this became the most important lesson that I've learned through my collaborations in New Brunswick, is that the way in terms of the way I teach positionality, that if you can't respect the history, language, and experience of a community with whom you're working, simply by giving it your full presence of mind and curiosity, then the work that you lead will fail or fail to its potential. Parallel to this work, I just want to share one more thing. Here you are. I've been grateful to be able to work with Amanda Potter, curator of education at the Zimmerli Art Museum, and Dr. Kristen Nebraska-Colfin, coordinator of public history at Rutgers, in facilitating listening sessions in response to a statue of the owner of enslaved persons in New Brunswick that was installed in 2017. The Colonel John Nelson statue was intended as a memorial to the local reading of the Declaration of Independence, but instead it serves as an artifact of the community cleavage in New Brunswick between its residents and institutions. And these conversations have led to new intergenerational understanding, but also very distinct ideas of the ways in which we should respond to the statue. Our older residents really have made themselves clear that they want an educational process, while our younger residents are very interested in the experience of removing the statue, that the actual act of removal is itself an important artistic intervention. We've been leveraging our administrative, financial, intellectual resources with a renewed focus on the African-American experience in our community, and I'm excited to share several new projects that are underway. We were awarded a Middlesex County History Grant to develop a new oral history archive with the New Brunswick area NAACP, focused on the experiences of African Americans from the summer of 1967 to the present moment of racial reckoning. We were awarded a grant by New Jersey State Council on the Arts to produce a women's suffrage mural in New Brunswick. The narrative of the installation is going to focus on Black women who have forwarded enfranchisement in New Jersey since women's suffrage. And we'll be working with Atlantic City-based artist Kelly Prevard. Our research partners include Dr. Kristen Nebraska-Colfin, Dr. Alexandria Russell of the Scarlet and Black Project, and Dr. Julia Satz-Rubin of Rutgers Blaustein School. And we're working on a new Paul Robeson mural for the city of New Brunswick at Paul Robeson Community School for the Arts. We'll be working with Newark-based artist Malcolm Rowling and focusing on his social and political legacy, working with students towards the mural's final design. And lastly, through 2021, we're piloting racial and social justice curriculum integration and professional development with New Brunswick Public Schools, using our oral history archive and project archive as a modeling and evidence-based resource for student learning and teacher development. Our students are actually creating the covering for the sign unveiling for the Lost Souls event on May 23rd, responding to the prompt, what does it take to build a strong community? And there are several other projects that are in different stages of development. I'll report back on once they're in place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan, and all our speakers this afternoon. You know, the range of the ways in which that you're all working, from the Lost Souls Public Memorial Project, the important work of bringing forth lost histories, lost lives, and grounding that work so that it isn't forgotten and brought back into our consciousness so it can inform how we move forward, to the incredibly important work that the Witherspoon-Jackson Neighborhood Cultural Society is doing to mark a known history, but to ground it in these kind of physical artifacts of markers, to ground it in space, so that as we move forward, that history has the kind of gravity that comes with the structure of the work that they're doing, the archiving and the physical marking of space. And quite inspired by, and I see the link that Fayemi had put in for the potential, the 5 potential sculptures for Tubman Square in Newark, and this very inclusive process of inviting the public in is mirrored, Dan, in the work that you all do in creating a process that, as you said, begins with listening. And I think to go from histories that are lost to histories that are at danger of being lost, to also then looking at the history that is being made in our communities and with the people we live with and side by side, and our histories, by respecting and listening and valuing the value of oral history and having that inform the work of coLABs. It's just the breadth of the ways in which each of these panelists is working is so critical. I'm walking away with a tremendous amount of ideas and inspirations that I would like to take back to the work that we do at Grounds for Sculpture, and I hope that the other participants today are equally inspired to bring these models and inspiration back to the work that they do with their organizations, in their lives, and in their community. Sam, I'm looking to you to see if there are any questions. I think there was one about the dimensions of the markers in for Mrs. Satterfield, but I'm not sure if that was answered. Are there any other questions? Yeah, it came back up. Shirley, there's a question about the dimensions of the.
I'm not quite sure, but I can get you that information as soon as I talk with the persons who are working to set them up. And you need to give me your name so I can send it to you.
Mm-hmm. So Noel,
Okay.
we can get that.
I know everything about the plaques, but the dimensions.
Great. So I don't think there are any more questions. So I'm thinking, let me just look. Doesn't look like it.
No,
So I'm thinking that we may go on to our wrap-up session. Linda, are you okay with that?
I'm fine with that. Okay.
Any last,
Again.
yeah, any last chance for questions for this panel or comments?
May I make I said something incorrect and I want to correct it before this goes out in public. I said that the Witherspoon School for Colored Children was established, I think I said 1853, but it's 1873. So I want that corrected.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let me share my screen just really quickly because we have two people to introduce to you all, and Linda is going to take us through what's next and introduce us to Noelle Lorraine Williams and Kate McGuire, who are on the Sankofa team in one way or the other. So Linda, I'm gonna move it on for you. And again, a reminder, don't forget about the June 1st event.
Okay, so I'm back. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you really enjoyed today as much as I did. I know that we can all get zoomed out, but there were so many interesting presentations today that I pretty much stayed alert through the entire day, because new information, new ways of looking at old information, it was wonderful. As most of you know, the Sankofa Collaborative was started rather loosely in 2017. We had no idea that we were starting an organization or a movement when we had our first program in I think it was January 23rd of 2017. It was supposed to be a one-time gathering of people who were affiliated in some way or another with historic houses. We've grown quite a bit since then. The 5 organizations that were that did all the work originally have now expanded their number by not their organizations, but expanded the people who work with us by another 3. One is Noelle Lorraine Williams, whom I have known for a while because we worked together at one point, who's a public humanities specialist, artist, researcher, and curator, and whose work examines African-American culture and reimagining liberation in the United States. She's exhibited all over the place. She's one of the brightest people I have ever met, and just an extraordinarily talented artist as well. And I urge each and every one of you to take a trip into Newark so that I can give you a mural tour and that I can introduce you to some of Noelle's work. She holds a Master of Arts in American Studies and Public Humanities from Rutgers University. And that school has really been turning out some wonderful people, wonderfully smart people. And Noelle is among them. And she's recently joined the New Jersey Historical Commission. So those of us who look for grants, be nice to Noelle, because she's in that position now as a program director for African American history. We haven't had anyone in that position for a very, very long time. So those of us who work in this field, Noelle, are especially very, very grateful that you are now there. And on behalf of the Sankofa Collaborative, I'd like to thank you already for what you have done for us as an organization. So welcome to the non-academic history community, because we're not but we really are academic to an extent. So I don't exactly know what to call us, but welcome to our community, whatever what we may be. Thank you.
Great.
And I'd like to also, I don't know, I'm sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, I didn't have anything to say right now.
Okay.
Just a reminder though, everyone, that it's the committee that decides the grants. So please do not send me lots of presents or anything, because the New Jersey Historical Commission, but I am here to serve, so.
Okay, very good. And next is Kathleen McGuire, whom we know as Kate McGuire, who's a freelance writer, editor, researcher, and archivist, who worked very intently. When I first met Beverly Endy Lane, maybe about 7 years ago, I also met Kate on that first meeting. We had a very nice lunch in Hopewell, New Jersey, and I'm hoping to get back there for some more dessert and stuffed cabbage. But she has been a member of our Sankofa Collaborative Working Force for a few months now. She's working on our new project, which you'll hear a little bit about later on, in our attempt to create and chart an African-American history tour of New Jersey. Kate has been very diligently doing her research and turning up in this very short couple of months that we've had her with all kinds of information that we did not know. We're very grateful for her. She has a Bachelor of Arts from Cedar Crest College and a master's degree in library information science from Rutgers University, another RU Rock person, and is on the board of the Trenton Historical Society and the Mercer Cemetery at Trenton for the past 10 years. And she's worked for the Trenton Collection at the Trenton Free Public Library, archiving various collections. We are so very happy to have Kate with us too, as well as Noelle. And one person that we weren't prepared to, but I think many of you had mentioned in the chat room today, our website. Michelle Hickey, who you first met this morning because she's the person who opened us up, is the person who does our website for us. For the Sankofa Collaborative, she also manages my website for 1804 Consultants. And as she mentioned in her introductory remarks, we began working together. Well, I think her son Charlie is now 27, so we must have started working together close to 30 years ago in higher education, and we've kept a working relationship ever since. But she is the person who produces that wonderful and curates that wonderful website and all the information in it that you receive just about on a weekly basis. So kudos to Michelle for that. She had to leave us after the morning session. And did I forget anyone? I think I've introduced everyone. I would normally go through a history of what the Sankofa Collaborative is, but I don't think I need to do that with this group. I think you pretty much know who we are, and some of you have known us from the very beginning. So you know what we once were, and now you know what we have become. I'm thinking of a guy who was with us that very first cold January morning for that very first workshop that we did. And Bruce. Bruce is here, but you know him from the Sankofa Collaborative. So I'll just let you read that information on the website again. I won't go through it again. Today, as is the case every time we have a program, I learn so much from all of you. And just want to I just want to express my thanks for your support and my congratulations on the excellent work that all of you are doing. I know I see some organizations represented out there in the audience, Lost Souls and Morven and Timbuktu and Kathy from Newark. And I'm just, I learned so much from all of you. And I'm very grateful for your willingness to share, for your willingness to answer every phone call or every email that we might send out. And I know there's one person who sent us one, Mr. Vanderhoof from Canada, that we have not quite responded to yet, but we will get to you. We have become so busy and so popular. This is volunteer work for members of the Sankofa Collaborative. Some of us have other jobs that we sometimes get a little bit behind in responding to you. But let me promise that we will respond. If you need information quicker than we can get it back to you, just send us a little nudge and we'll move you up on the priority list of responses, because it is never our intent to ignore any comment or any request. We have just entered into a world that we were totally unprepared for, that it entered into friendship and scholarship with a group of people that we did not know were even out there. So sometimes we get a little overwhelmed with what we have to do. But we promise to get back to each and every single one of you. Sometimes you ask us for information that we frankly don't know and have to do some research on our own to get a response for you. That's what part of the holdup is. But please believe that we are appreciative of your support and of your attention, and we will get back to you. So we are moving on, and you've heard it us allude to next projects. One is commemorating the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, which we will do on June 1st. And we think it's going to be an exciting program in a little bit different way to commemorate that event in our history. But on October 28th, and we hope that all of you have this already marked on your calendar, we are planning what will be, I think, our biggest event yet. Hopefully, it will be an in-person event at Grounds for Sculpture. It will be an all-day event with, we think, hopefully a star-studded cast. Part of it is we will be commemorating our 5th anniversary as a collaborative. But the most important part is unveiling the information that we will have collected on Black historical sites, cemeteries, markers, historical societies, libraries, any entity whatsoever that is in existence in the state of New Jersey that has some sort of African-American relatedness. That also includes organizations that may not have that as their main focus, but who are doing work in that area, like Morven, for instance. And we will unveil the fruits of our labor on October 28th through a series of workshops and through a series of speakers whom I think you will find most interesting. So we want you to save that date. We want you to respond to Kate whenever she sends you an email or picks up the phone, because all the information that you give us will be provided about your organization when we meet on October 28th. It is really a kickoff for that project because we feel that collecting the information is really just the first step. Putting the information in a usable format is the second. And putting in information in a usable format, both digitally for virtual visits, and also putting it in a format that you can use if you're out with the family for a Saturday afternoon. You can take your cell phone and it will have an app where you can visit all over the state, any entity that is African American related. You will have privy to their website. You will have privy to information about their events. And we know that this is going to take us a while to assemble. So October 28th is really a kickoff for that project that we envision will probably take us a few years to thoroughly complete the way that we would like to see it completed. And of course, part of that depends upon attracting funding as well, but we're confident that we're going to be able to attract the funding to do this for our very precious state of New Jersey, who sometimes hasn't been too precious to people of color, but we're going to try and forget that and really bring to fruition what we think will be a gift, not only for the residents of New Jersey, but a gift for everyone who visits the state of New Jersey at any given time, whether virtually or in person. So please keep that date on your calendar. Again, it will hopefully be at Gary's Place at Grounds for Sculpture. And if you haven't been there yet, you are in for a treat when you visit that facility. If someone from the Sankofa Collaborative can tell me what else I'm supposed to announce, I'd be most grateful. I think that was it. Is that true?
This is Sam. I think that's it.
Okay.
If we have any last questions from anybody who's still with us.
And this is the time for any comments about anything that we've been doing that you like or dislike or feel that we should be doing in a different way or being more inclusive about the way we do it. Because we are here to serve you. It's a labor of love for us, but we want the information that we give to be useful to you as well. And sometimes you have to tell us something 2 or 3 times. If you haven't noticed, some of us, we all have gray hair. We're all old. So sometimes we forget. It's not on purpose. It's really, I'm going to put it up to age, because it's also not within our heart to not be attentive to what you need and what you desire. But we are old. All of us, except for one, are retired. And this is, and for many of us, a second, a third, in my case, a 4th career. So please, we need your guidance in order to do an effective job. So if you have anything, now is the time to voice it.
So Linda, I have one sort of observation question on the Lee Memorial in Richmond and the treatment that it has received. Does anyone know, does it still look like that at this point with the Black Lives Matter, the other paint and things on it? The reason I'm asking is I thought it looked pretty good. Has anybody thought about just leaving it the way it is?
I don't know if anyone knows, but I'm going to Richmond next week, and I'll make sure that I take a visit.
All right.
Thank you,
let me
Next
know.
weekend, not this weekend. Next weekend, I'll be in Richmond for a few days, and I'll make sure I get there.
Yeah, Bruce, my understanding is that it's fenced in at the moment because it was slated to come down, and there's some now court wrangling around that. But Linda, I would love to get your eyes and on the site if you get to go by there.
I'll take some photos.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll make sure that it's on my list. Anyone else? Okay. Well, then let me close out by just saying congratulations. I don't know if this is something that we could have done 10 years ago, which is not to say that there have not been people working in the field of African-American culture in the state of New Jersey for a long time. There have been. We all know Giles Wright. We, of course, also know the late Dr. Clement Alexander Price. We miss them. I pay homage to them. I knew them both, had them both as mentors, and I'm thinking now that they're looking down upon this group today and beaming from heaven. because in many ways we are following in the path that they charted, first and foremost. And I'm grateful to all of you for the work that you do, and also for your friendship and for your guidance. And I cannot overstate enough how much the Sankofa Collaborative needs you to help us with our work. And again, when you get that call from Kate, and Kate, maybe you might want to place your email in the chat for people who may have information for you that you don't know to reach out to.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that.
I see Dr. Penelope Lattimore here, who I know doesn't know me, but I know her and her work, and I bow down to you. Thank you so much for decades of contributions to the world of arts and culture. Thank you for coming today. I'm really honored that you decided to join us. I'm a Douglas graduate, and know you from that, Leadership New Jersey, and all sorts of other things as well. So thank you for being with us. But we may not have you on our list to contact. So I'm thinking if some of you may have information to share with Kate for our major project, please just put your email in there so she can get in touch with you. Okay. And I will end it there unless there are other comments. And
one thing, Linda, we did get a very generous question about how to donate to support us,
yes,
which is really great. The Trent House Association is the fiscal agent for the Sankofa Collaborative, because as Linda said, we are a collaborative, not a organization with its own board and so on. So you can donate to Sankofa via PayPal from the Trent House website, which is williamtrenthouse.org, or you can send a check to the Trent House, and be sure to, on both of those ways, indicate that this is for Sankofa. And we have our own separate Sankofa checking account, so funds don't get mixed up. So don't worry, we'll go to where you want it.
okay. I should again say thank you to our sponsors, who are the New Jersey Historical Commission, the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. Gigi Naglick and Sarah Curitan have both been in our corner from our earliest days of beginning. Lately, we have sponsorship from the Johnson & Johnson Foundation. And I always forget the Pennsylvania group, Health First. Is that the name of it, Sam?
Patient First.
Patient First organization in Pennsylvania. We have had their support too, as well as your financial support too. We really have not had to. We pay our speakers a little, whatever we can afford to pay them. We do give them an honorarium, but we have not, and we've had to charge for our in-person events, just because we know that we can't keep you someplace for 8 hours and not feed you. And none of our grants allow us to do that. So the only cost of ever attending a Sankofa Collaborative event till this point has been for food. Thanks to Gary, who has been very generous with his facility at Grounds for Sculpture. We've been able to offer all of our 20 some odd programs that we've offered for a very nominal course. And we hope to be able to do that in the future as well. Your contributions help. Also, the generosity of our speakers help, because we know that you are worth much more than we are able to pay you. So we thank you for your generosity too. And so I'll close, if there's nothing else, with the very simple words of lift every voice. We need your voices to be heard throughout the land if we're ever going to completely change things around. So lift every voice and yell, scream, sing, pray, whatever it is that you have to do until all are free.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you all very much for a wonderful day. And keep checking the Sankofa website for upcoming events and resources. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.